we're gonna talk about season 1 a little bit. We just wrapped it up. Had a lot of cool stuff happen. Kind of happened really quick, and we're gonna take some time with that and look back at it. Look back at our characters, the story, everything that changed, where we're going, all that fun stuff that we have to talk about. But do we want to?
What part of it went by quick?
It just, it's a lot. There's a lot in one session. It's a lot in 1 or 2 sessions. Yeah. Story wise, it's a lot to absorb. I apologize. That makes more sense. I think one of the things that should be talked about, and I did just kind of get it out early in a little brief conversation on it, is there was a little bit of a party change, pretty abruptly. We had a couple of the party members step away, and we didn't really talk about that a lot. Really, at the base of it, it was just there were several creative. What are they called? Disagreements, I guess. Differences. Thank you. That led to some people taking a leave, and that happens in projects like this. And obviously, it was great to get as far as we did, and I think that the people that left there are still a big part of why the story was good and why we got to get this far.
I think it felt like it was it was honest in the sense of it was a real D&D group,
mm-hmm.
right? So you and I played together in a previous game.
Yes.
And kind of when you wanted to put this thing together, you kind of tapped me and said, "Hey, I've got this group," and this was a real group of real people that met and decided they want to play D&D together. And I mean, I've run for a long time. Culprit, how long have you ran?
I've actually been running maybe 1.5 to 2 years now.
Okay, is that how long you've been playing?
Yeah. I think my first campaign that I really actually played in was about 2 years ago, and then I took the reins of GMing probably like a year ago, if that.
Have things been pretty steady, or have you had that disastrous game that just dissolves?
Oh, you always have disagreements. Yeah, I've never had a game that dissolved that I GM'd, because I've only had the opportunity to GM one game. So, and it's
mm-hmm.
been going on for like 10 months now.
Yeah.
But as for there was a campaign that a buddy of mine was running that dissolved in maybe 4 to 5 runs. Another one that dissolved, I think also kind of quickly, around 2 to 3 runs. And then one good thing that I've seen also in the past is the campaigns that I was a part of before GMing was one person takes over for 3 weeks to a month. The next person takes over for a month. The next person takes over for a month, and they just kind of rotate and cycle out their stories. But you kind of lose a lot of the meat and potatoes in that. It just
I'd say
heavily.
It feels like, we've in a short time you've experienced a lot of the things that I've been able to experience. I've had the good fortune of being introduced to the game really early.
Mm-hmm.
I was 10 or 11 years old when my uncle gave me his old books, which were copies of the red box, right? They had hand inscribed them in a binder. But I feel like you two did the good service. We got Culprit in to kind of get it over the finish line. I personally, I miss those characters. I miss the opportunity to be able to tell their story.
Yes.
But I think the story survived.
100%. Yeah. I mean, like I said, it was a blast just to be able to do it, and I would have loved to keep on doing it that way, but sometimes just life gets in the way, which is it happens. We're human. But with that, that's a big thing out of the way. Into characters is a good segue. Is we can talk about kind of where our characters are, where they're going, what they came from, just that general sense of character discussion. And I think we should start with the newest character first, Culprit's character here, because a little late to the series, but I feel like in the 2 episodes that you had, you made a big impact. It felt, for me as a player, it felt very smooth. It didn't feel like oh well, we just need somebody to do something to force a character, and you fit well. And I mean, even to an extent, had like good reason to be invested in the season finale. That had emotional weight for you too. And I think your character has been super interesting so far. So if you want to talk about him a little bit.
Yeah. So my character has like I don't know, like a protector syndrome. Likes to help those, but in the process, he does have like a gambling issue. So
okay.
he's kind of stuck on two forefronts. One's like this really big drawback to him is like he's willing to trade anything for a try at the dice to see if he can get at the table again. However, like he wouldn't trade a life for that. So it was like the protector fighter is what I was going for, and knowing that Jim was in there with me, and like he was a stand up guy. Like I didn't see anything in the time frame that we were in that cell together of anything other than he just wanted out, and he was just doing his daily things for the short time that I got to know him. But yeah, it was. Character, I'm loving the way that he came out, and like he doesn't like to take life, but he's willing to skirt the boundaries by allowing the clouds to take somebody else's life from something else.
100%.
So it's like,
yeah, your character just had so many good moments. I think he fits well with kind of what the party's become. There's a big change when you lose party members. And we went from a big group to a very small group. So I think that the presence that you bring to that, and the fact that you just kind of fit in so well, is hopefully if we continue to have you on in the future, which I would love to, we get to see that build more. We get to build that relationship, because I feel like even in those 2 episodes we didn't really have a chance to sit down and be like, oh hey, hi, how's it going? But you definitely connected well. Now, I think you fit a good spot in the party, but let's look a little into the future here. Obviously we're not trying to spoil anything. We're not going to be like, oh well, this is what I plan to do, black and white. But with the events of so far, how are you feeling with the future, general future of your character? Obviously you've attached yourself to this group of relatively strangers, and we're in this kind of bigger quest now on this way to this city that you're not even familiar with. There's a lot that could change, happen, and progress in your character. So you have any idea on what you think that future is going to look like at all?
Well, in the words of Rand himself, I believe that I heard Jim call you brother, and you guys were half brothers, and he was a good person, so I think I'm gonna stick with you, protect you like I would Jim. See what may come of that. I have no place to be, and we'll see where the dice fall.
All right. Yeah, I think there's go ahead, Chris.
I was saying, like, I just think that one of the interesting things that happened, which is definitely a plus, is this idea of like just the interesting little character nuances, like the things that came out, the abilities, this character that didn't necessarily wasn't properly introduced, was sort of like wham, character there, right? And like you said, like filling that gap whenever other players like have to leave, and we're introducing a new player, a new character mid season, mid campaign. I think the choices that were made for this particular character play very well into seeding new interesting ways for the story to go into the future, and actually synergize really well with some of the plot points that some of you don't know about yet. But then simultaneously, like, it could have gone really wrong. So like, I'm curious, like when you two got a hold of Culprit and were trying to bring him on board, did you guys have that classic player entering campaign mid campaign like dialogue, which is typically something along the lines of like, so what does your party need? Or was this like, something other than that?
So that's actually, a pretty interesting conversation, because I, for one, didn't really care what he played, what he filled. I just, heard from Alex, because before this, Culprit and I had not met more than me interacting with his Twitch channel a few times, just a friend of a friend. But we sat down and talked about it, and my whole point was just more interested in finding somebody who I think is going to play well with us. And just within that conversation we had, I knew that he was going to do well. Like I didn't know what he was going to play at all. I liked the idea of not knowing. If he wanted to be another bard or another druid, I wasn't going to stop him. Because to me, and obviously this isn't always the case with every campaign, but this being something that we're kind of, I call it a show a lot. Like that's what it feels like to me. It feels like it's a story that is being told through D&D. It's a little cliche or whatever, but that aspect was a lot more important to me. So me personally, I was not super concerned about what the character was going to be as long as it was there. Alex, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I do remember that ever so slightly we did, there were questions back and forth of, this is kind of what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
And asking about the party and what we have and fill in. We've got all of these different characters. These ones are stepping away. But yeah, we really left that up to Culprid. Like, whatever you want to play is all good. We've got other ways we can work through stuff. If, as you've noticed through things, we like to talk our way through situations that probably shouldn't be talked through.
Yeah, a little bit.
Somehow mean to pull that through. So, really anything that Culprid came in with was gonna be perfectly okay, and more power to you, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny too, because I think I mentioned at the very beginning, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go Paladin, because I don't know why. I always go Galthuk, the Paladin. I have 7 Galthuks out in the world right now in different games where I play this holy Paladin that just brings the light wherever there's darkness. And this time I just decided, I'm gonna still bring the light, but I'm gonna bring the light with a little bit more muscle.
Yeah. Is that what they call the lawful stupid? Yes. Okay, got it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think
a daft character is so great. The character that urges the party towards chaos and calamity through do-gooding, so good.
I
love that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, because Kelpie is also kind of this. He more so started this way. Kelpie's gone through a lot. He started as this character that was he's just kind of dumb. He just he's got his little banjo, and he just walks around this weird barefoot fish man that just wants to bring joy to the world. And I think it's interesting because there definitely could be a conflict where we have two characters with could be played very similarly, but I feel like we fill such different slots. Just a little bit we got to see, even in the combat, that's what had me, that's what hooked me on your character, is just how you manage to make something so simple as a unarmed strike into just one of the funniest things that's happened in the campaign. You're bonking dudes on the head, and you're the trapdoor spider bit was just hilarious. I will never forget that. You bring such a different levity that Kelpie does, especially. I think it's refreshing because especially now, Kelpie, the world kind of forced him to not be that anymore. He's almost had that innate joy kind of ripped from him, and he's at a place where he has to find it again. But yeah, I think there's a lot of going forward. I think there is a lot of promise for the character. I don't know if there's anything that you want to talk about background. Obviously, those are I'd love to see that just get introduced through story-wise. So that's not something you want to speak on. Okay, awesome. Yeah.
And then I can bring in the future why it is I have my bad traits and this and that. But I'm having a blast with you guys. I love the storytelling that Chris has been doing. It's amazing, and I'm still a new GM, so it's even though I've been doing it for about 10 months, I'm learning. I don't know every class out there, and I'm sure Chris may have gaps in what classes can do and this and that, and he has to go research it because one person being a single point of knowledge is just insane unless it was our job.
I'm gonna provide a little hot take here.
Okay.
And because like I have played lots of different types of games and different versions, different editions, and I don't really care about the rules. Personally, so it's like I have this thing to where it's like, okay, all right, if you're gonna play a class, like even for new players, it's like, okay, you want to play a this, that, and the other, cool, perfect. Know your abilities, right? So there's this amount of trust that I need to put into them that they will learn their character. And then, if that person needs a little helping hand, then yeah, sure, I'll kind of go, out and learn that character for a campaign. But it's like, I do not have encyclopedic knowledge of all of the things that go on inside the options in 5e right now. But, I don't need all that rattling around inside my head in order to, tell a compelling story, right?
Yeah, and I kind of aim for that rule of cool as well. So,
well, I tell you what, you have the perfect party for not caring about the rules. This some of the stuff we do. I mean, I don't know. I feel like for how wacky a lot of our interactions are, like we managed to keep it within the lines, which has been honestly kind of impressive.
Truly.
Yeah. Chris, you have any other? What are your thoughts on obviously plans changed and you had to pretty quickly shift how we're going to handle a lot of things, and then on top of that, pretty short notice, we're like, hey, we're bringing in another character. How were you thinking that was going to look like? What were your first thoughts, and compared to now that you've got to experience this and you got to play that out and see how that went?
So fortunately, I always have kind of this sort of spare parachute sort of perspective on my games. Like I don't know. What I learned early on with the group was that if I go and I plan a session, I'm pretty much guaranteed to get 2 sessions worth of content out of it, just because of how I plan and how everyone plays at the table. And that was like with the old group. So like Manassas, Nadine, Talok, like when they were in the group, it would extend, there would be these spaces, these gaps of, like 20-30 minutes of RP throughout each session that would like swallow up the time where it was just like, I'm ready with this if they choose to. So with the party shift, I had basically weaved together how your story beats and Moss's story beats played in sort of the greater plot, and then everybody else's were kind of braided and twisted in with yours as well. When the rift happened, I basically had to say like, well, I guess I have to let those other story beats just kind of fade away and just let them untangle themselves, which was unfortunate because like there were some cool things that kind of like all of the points we had up to that point. Like there are little things, like little recall things that during the last couple of sessions would have been like, oh my god, and I remember that from my character back then too, right? So like in the way that like your choices at the festival affected Jim's animus towards you in very specific ways, and I don't know. I feel like bringing in a character, it sort of resuscitated this the planning phase. So like I'm looking at Ren's choices now, and being like, okay, this magic item, this particular ability, this background, this misfortune that led him to this place, right? And all of those are little strings that you all can pull on to figure out the bigger overarching like ecology of the world. Because I was actually doing the math today, so the party traveled in how many sessions was it? Like 9-10 sessions? 11?
We hit full campaign was 11 sessions.
Okay, 11 sessions. Y'all only traveled, not counting like the downtime travel near the end of the campaign, which like really wasn't travel. I think it was like something like 80 miles. Like that's it. So there's a big world to explore
for sure,
and there's lots of cool stuff to do. You know, it's one of those things to where like I could probably have 3 or 4 groups running campaigns in different places on the continent, and you know they may never even come in contact with each other. I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, no, the last big bit of DMing I did, just to off track a little bit here, I had a very similar thing where it's just this big world, and I had 3 different campaigns in it, but they were all in different sections, and one of the campaigns figured that out, and even with them actively trying to get to where the other campaign was, they never got there within the session. So like it's super. I love how big our world is, and I'm excited to see Rend fit into it and kind of figure it out, because like you said, we've been in like the same section of this world for like the whole first season, which is fine. You know, like there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot more. This season was very character based for sure.
We also probably could have pushed it to like 15 or 16 episodes, hadn't we like
sure.
lost a lot of time trying to like, because you know there's scheduling issues, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then I got sick. I had COVID for like almost 3 weeks, and that just threw a wrench in a lot of stuff, because that, you know, especially like it really caught me off guard, you know, just not thinking about it when that season end came, because I was like, oh wow, yeah, we lost like almost a month. We lost like 2 sessions. So I still think we recovered well, and I'm super excited for season 2. But with that, I think we have a good a good step off point from Rend here into let's talk about Moss. Let's talk about our awesome little robot druid friend. So same thing, you know, just kind of a general character discussion. This is your chance to discuss, ask questions to the DM, or just share with the party like just from where you started to where you are now, anything in between that, and where you think you're going, like with intent for the character. Moss is so interesting. I'm just always waiting to see what you're gonna do with him.
Yeah, Moss has definitely been more of a challenge for me to play than most other characters. Just getting into the backstory just right off of the bat was... I think I gave Chris maybe a sentence of backstory, like, this is the idea I'm kind of thinking of, if you want to fill stuff in. And so far, just where the story's been, I don't think we've seen much there, but I've been able to pick up on a lot of, like, where Moss fits in, and what can come of it with Moss in the story right now. So I'm very excited to see those curveballs that he throws at me. But as far as actually having Moss in the party, so far it's really just, he's kind of been getting his land legs. He's been asleep for a really long time before this campaign started, so he's kind of forgotten society and people, and he's slowly learning to work with others and figure stuff out. And that's where you can see a lot of like the self-preservation in him, of okay, it's time to go. We got to get out of here right now, because we're gonna die. He doesn't like to play that close, and he really likes to get out of that situation before it's dangerous. But as far as going forward, there's a couple things that I think we will see in the future. I know we did mention towers. Moss has a vested interest in towers, so hopefully we can find some more soon and kind of explore that a little more.
It's just likes climbing, that's all. There's nothing big there. He's just
nothing big there. It's no.
He enjoys heights.
I don't know how much the actual like session, what we call session 0. So some may not know that there was a session 0 where it was basically like it was 4 like half-hour micro sessions with each of the individual characters to place them before session 1.
I think those actually still exist on the YouTube channel.
They may exist somewhere. I remember like all of them were recorded, I believe. I'm not sure if like they were actually produced and published. But Moss's was very like it was because your character would not actually wake up until session 1. The entire session took place in a dream, and it was very chaotic, and it was full of visions. And so like I still have my original notes for like the vision sequence that you went through. And so it's like to be able to, in the long term, what I'm excited about is to be able to deliver on those things in unexpected ways.
Yeah, so it's looking back at our YouTube channel, and somehow, probably due to my negligence, those never got uploaded. I really think that those will probably go up with this, because those
the secret releases,
they were just a super interesting way to share stuff about these characters and kind of introduce these characters to the DM without giving a whole lot away, but they really just establish this strong, like, this is kind of what this guy is going to be, and set a super I think it honestly was super healthy to the campaign for us to do that. Like, even when the other characters were in here, like, a lot of that was just kind of setting them up, even though they didn't get an opportunity to do a lot of the things that may have been set up. So with Moss, right, I think a very interesting thing with Moss is going forward with this shift. You know, Moss had kind of developed a relationship with Nadine, this friendship, and obviously now Kelpie and Moss are close, more even more so than they were before, because there's only so many of us now. But I'm excited to see the dynamic going forward, and I'm wondering, how do you feel about how that formed? Like, obviously we had our moments before Kelpie and Moss, you know, they had moments where they kind of bonded and talked and whatnot. But now we're in this position where we have to, and we've been through this pretty tough thing together. How do you think that's going to look going forward?
Well, of course, Kelpie is my favorite fish. And I don't think that'll ever change.
T-shirts now available.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that's been tricky with Moss, is even before everything happened in the campaign, he never had friends or really a family or anyone that he could go rely on. So it's gonna be interesting to see going forward, because we did lose a lot of the friends that Moss had made, whether or not that's gonna put distrust, or whether it's just gonna make Kelpie and Moss that much closer, where he can kind of rely on Kelpie to get him through those social situations. Even when we look back in Allengil in those first couple episodes, I think Moss spent about 80% of that as a cat.
Yeah,
a lot of it was as a cat, or growing trees.
Yeah. Yes, a lot of trees. That's one of those things with Moss where you're gonna keep seeing trees, you're gonna keep seeing shrubs and plants, and he's very closely tied to the nature of plants and wants to see those flourish and bloom and grow. So I'm very excited to see how that plays in. But as far as character interaction, yeah, we'll definitely have to explore that a little bit going forward.
Yeah, I like the eccentricities. I like the playing it as it is, because, you know, to the dream sequence, like, you know, anchoring memory as sort of like this way to like prevent yourself from losing your mind completely in the dream world. You know, and then the earliest memory being sort of like this awakening, you know, like with like this awakening adjacent to like a potential creator, right? And that kind of being just this fated thing that you have to like hold on to. And then it's like, okay, we did the math once, right? So it's just like, because in the dream world, it's the time is different and you were asleep for X duration. It was like some insane number of years that your character was technically like floating around the dream world.
It was, if I can remember properly, right around like 3,000 some years.
That's crazy. I completely forgot it was that long.
Just a couple.
So,
yeah.
So then to suddenly be awake and like, perhaps even be distrustful is like, is this real? Like, am I actually awake? I think, and I had wondered if, we didn't really kind of go into the loss of how we, as a DM, the challenge of writing off several characters that we've been really tight with, like, how do we do that? And we spent a lot of time collectively, all of us, trying to figure out a way to honor and respect like that part of the story and those people and those characters in a way that was not disruptive, but also allowed us the creative freedom. And it's like, I think ultimately we kind of decided like what happened to them was a mystery and it was the fault of the villains. Right. So it's like this potentially provides Moss. I will get to my point here in a second. If Moss is looking for skin in the game, potentially it's like those were my friends, right? And they're gone now. And not necessarily, this search to get them back, but to get even with potentially, the villains that are kind of mustering their forces. Because I think that'll be a big part of like the upcoming next session of gameplay is like, there's this understanding that this threat is growing in the wood, and it's just like, we need power, we need allies, we need a solution, right?
For sure. Something that I was thinking about earlier with the conversation of Moss's connection to nature. I was wondering if this was something that was intentional. You have this obsession with growth, and you often have find yourself with like seeds or planting things. Is that intentional? Because I see that when I see these things, I see the direct connection of that to Moss. Moss is this, in this new world, he is this seed. He is this small piece of life that has to grow into this new world. And I'm wondering if that was a direct connection, or if that's just my like writer's brain just kind of making that in my head.
No, it's not something I ever really thought about. Honestly. But it's not entirely wrong.
Yeah.
Because if you just look at Moss, he's constantly growing. He has plants that are intertwined with his being of who he is, one of them being his eye that is a flower, and all of this tree branches growing off of him, and legitimate just moss and other foliage that grows on him. So it is partially him putting his place in the world and metaphorically and physically putting down his roots somewhere.
Yeah,
where he can have that place to call home.
Yeah, I think Moss is just, Alex and I have known each other for a while. We've played, our first like interaction with D&D together was me DMing for him. And even in that story, watching Alex play characters is just so interesting, because he's more, you're more of a kind of laid back, subdued person. And the things that you do, even if you keep that part of you in your characters, which you somewhat tend to do, you make it in such a interesting way that's more of like a something that's engaging. You make a subdued character engaging, which honestly from a writing and acting standpoint is just something very impressive. Like I'm always excited to see what Moss is going to do every session, because it's always something small with a big impact.
That's kind of the beauty of Moss that I've loved from the beginning. And really in Bleakwood is where that started at its strongest, of putting the branches together. And I remember after that episode where I explained the grafting of the tree and then proceeded to plant it, I had a conversation with Chris where I remember you saying, I had no idea what you were talking about, so I trust that it was correct and just run with it. Because I do work with plants a lot, and I love my garden in my real life, so being able to bring some of those skills and tips and tricks that I've learned from working with plants into the characters, it makes it something special for me to play and helps me to give that off to someone else.
Yeah, he is a special character. I guess it's my turn, unless Mr. DM, you have any thoughts, any last thoughts on Moss here?
I think I'll hold the comments for now.
Okay. Great. Now I have to, which
Right, you do. Go for it.
the egotistical Kelpie. I think I'll structure it how everybody else did, kind of where I was, where I'm going. Kelpie was very different from any other character I play. Chris has seen me play. I think Alex, you've seen me in like one shots and whatnot, obviously in this, but a lot of times I don't play characters like that. I don't find myself playing somebody that's like, the goal with Kelpie was to be the simplest person in the party, which didn't happen because I just can't help myself. But I usually play somebody that's more like the intelligent character that's kind of like an asshole sort of thing. Not necessarily dumb, because I don't think Kelpie's dumb, but he's got that dumb aspect to him. Is a hard character for me to play, just because I don't fit with it well. So I wanted to go out of my comfort zone and play that. And I think honestly, Kelpie is the most fun I've had in this game in the almost 10 years I've been playing it. I think that watching Kelpie go from this fun-loving guy who just wants to bring music into the world, having this just traumatic thing happen, and he takes it on the chin, and he ends up on this adventure that he doesn't really want to be on, and you slowly see him kind of lose this happiness he has, which is something that to Kelpie, is just devastating. This is his whole being is joy, and now this religious aspect was put in fairly early. I had discussed with Chris a few times of like the future of where I want my character to go, and I don't think it's like officially been revealed of what's happening with that. So I don't think I'm gonna say with the powers and whatnot. Like I don't think I've said why Kelpie has these things, so I'm not gonna say it yet. It's not like a huge secret, but whatever. In this religious bit with Kelpie, of him going from this interest to this longing, this he says a lot, this thing that he feels in his soul, in his heart, kind of morphed him from this fun-loving guy to this, I don't know if I want to say jaded, but very like emotional creature, of just feeling lost. And every single time he thought he'd found something, he kind of was left with nothing. He like little bits and pieces of something that he was hoping for to be an answer. And I think it was very poetic that he found his answer after the hardest of the tragedy happened. He finally finds his brother, and he immediately loses him. And in that moment, that lowest moment for Kelpie, is when he finds this answer, whatever this religious spiritual thing is. It shows him something, it gives him something, and I'm super excited to elaborate on that in the next season. I think that Kelpie's in a place where he can start to process what's happened, and he can hope to find that joy again. It just might be through a different avenue this time, but I'm super excited about it.
I feel that. I from an outside sort of like GM perspective, watching the character develop, it started as like, okay, this is the, I imagined like you watch the old, you watch the films that depict like the 1900s, where you see like, the barefoot boy in a straw hat kind of walking up a dirt road by himself with a fishing cane, right? It's just like that kind of thing. And there's this idea of, like the hero's journey, where it's just like you've got the person, they're sort of stuck in the old world, their life is largely fine, and then everything gets turned upside down, and like their perspective is broken, right? And I feel like that's kind of the journey that it went through. But the story's also kind of been like in alignment with the other PCs too. So harkening back to like, you know, when it was originally just so Kelpie, Moss, Nadine, and Talok, I don't know how much collaboration, because I feel like a lot of it was private between you all developing these characters. You all inherently did something, and I don't think you knew that you did it. And I see this in a lot of character creation, but you all brought like a trauma of some kind, and some of the trauma was very similar, which was very odd to witness. So Kelpie had this, you know, like excuse the pun, like fish out of water, sort of like I don't belong here sort of thing. So family issues, trying to find their place in the world. Moss, you know, similarly brought this you know, like identity crisis, this isolation, right? And like, you know, perhaps not necessarily distrust, but like, you know, like entering the world with fresh eyes, like, you know, and a man out of time sort of perspective. You know, Talok had really great story beats there aligned with that. Nadine too, like, you know, with the family trauma that we explored a little bit. And then there was some cool stuff happening when Manassas joined, because they joined as brothers, right?
Yeah.
And I think seeing everybody kind of grow, it happened. You know, not everybody finished their growth, but like especially for Kelpie though, that 20 roll on the religion check after trying to crack the code on this magical item that was bestowed upon them, like in what, session 2?
Yeah.
And like every game, like I make a religion roll, crap, brother dies, nat 20, right?
Yeah. And it felt so just unreal because we couldn't have written that better. Completely, you know, like I honestly, if I was watching that, I would have like, oh no, they planned that. But no, that like, I know we had a conversation a couple times when I started developing this. Oh, I want this some sort of like mystery involving Kelpie and religion to happen, because I think it's a kind of a blind side to his character. And I started doing these checks, and you're like, you need to make these checks. Like, make these checks. Like, I have a plan for it, and I just failed it every single time, and that was always so frustrating. And I think, honestly, I'm really glad it went that way, because that frustration of me as a player fit so well with Kelpie. It helped me push into that a lot more, because like, especially if you have this thing and you're learning more and more about this spiritual side of the world, and you start, like, you feel it, like Kelpie lived with this. He had this urge in his soul, and it's like an itch you can't scratch kind of thing. And I just, like, I still, anytime I think about that, I just can't help but smile. That was just so incredible. Like, oh my goodness.
I think having the character development to be reactive to the story is a good thing too. So, like, you know, there's lots of different ways to play the game, but for this particular type of play, it feels very much appropriate for the character choices, mechanically speaking, be it like, you know, the feats you take, the skills you attempt to study, what you do with the downtime, what you do with your character level, as far as like investing into spells, abilities, you know, class levels, whatever. Having the story kind of drive that simultaneously, like sort of like, you know, one hand on each wheel. Like I really want to play a cool character, but I really want the cool character to like influence the future of the story. So like having those conversations early was really cool. Moss, you know, Alex and I have had some conversations about like what is going on with Moss, especially in this downtime. You know, looking forward to maybe having those conversations with Rend, and then, you know, if other characters kind of get like picked up into it as well, because like one of the things that I've seen in different types of I don't know if I'll call it may be too pejorative to call it like Munchkin style games, is like people will have their character planned out from level 1 to level 20, sort of as this like Optimancer kind of way to play the game. Which is fine, but being so rigid, right? It's like, okay, I want my character to do this, but what if the story turns a different direction? And this super optimized character can't use their optimized things, because that's not the type of game that's being played.
For sure.
So, yeah.
I think it's, not to speak for everybody, but for me, 100%. Every single decision that's made on that character sheet from a mechanical point, there are a lot of things that I took that are objectively worse than something else. Like, even just how my character's built. Like, my character is built like the least optimal. But it fits Kelpie. It's what he needs to be. Like, I don't want to call myself a snob, but like, this is why I play this game. I don't care if my character dies every single fight. I've shown that. As long as I get to
every single fight,
whatever,
every single fight, even though in the moment I see you pounding your head on the table, like literally, like I can't get a break. No, I'm playing in a separate campaign, and like my character is very much a pacifist. So like I literally have zero offensive capabilities. Like I can do some crowd control, some meta magic type stuff, but like no offense whatsoever. And the other players are starting to pick up on it, and they're just like, they're talking to me in character, but like, you're not really helpful in combat. It's just like, oh well.
Yeah, there's something special about this game, because I've always, part of the reason I got into this game and stuff, I've always been interested in like the film side of the world, like the acting and the blah blah blah. And this is a great game to do that. If you have the right party for it, you just get to pretend for a little bit, and you get to, hopefully if you and your DM work well, which like I feel like through this whole project we've had just such a great relationship with you. You've done like everything that we wanted and more. You get to have these satisfying character moments that you might not get in other parties that are just like, oh, I want to fight monsters, which is also a valid way to play this game.
Sure. Yeah.
100%. I'm trying to think about if there's any other Kelpie stuff to really talk about. Anybody have any hard-hitting questions or commentary for Mr. Kelpie?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
We're for kind of both of us, but any underlying ideas going forward of what is that next step?
100%. I looking at us, and I mean Ren fits it super well too. Is I think, at least from a player standpoint, this next season is going to be the season of identity. Kelpie has lost this. Not only did he lose his family, he lost this ideal picture of his family. What he thought he was ripped from him. He is just now learning that Tritons are a thing. He thought he was this single being alone in the world, and now he has this new development with this religious, spiritual side of him. And I think that this leaves a character that is going to have to take all of these things and find himself. I think that identity is going to be such an important part of Kelpie in this next season. And not to speak for your characters, but just a quick look over of them, that's something that could be super prevalent for both of you. Moss wants to find his creator and see more about his past, and Ren, we just met him in a prison. He's been there. Nobody knows how long he's been there. Obviously Ren does, and he is with this party and doesn't really know what's going to happen going forward, but he's here to develop on that. I think that identity is the key word for that, 100%. Unless somebody else has other Kelpie stuff, I think we can kind of move on into the next section of this conversation. But yeah, because I will talk about Kelpie all day long if we don't. Next little notation here I have is into the story of the campaign. So we've talked about this a little bit privately, but I think the pivot, like obviously you knew beforehand, like, hey, we want this to be this is going to be a long running campaign. So I'd assume the story was prepped for that somewhat, and you discussed how you prep your campaigns a few times, and this, that, and the other. But I'm really interested on your perspective of how it was planned and how the plan changed to get where we are. Because yeah, and that's going to be a little bit of a big one, but we'll get that out of the way so we can talk about the smaller story beats.
Okay, so the campaign, how it came together, how it was ran, and to where I'm at now. Okay, so fortunately, I've had the privilege of running this game world in 5th edition several times. So I've had adventures in different parts of the map.
Okay.
So, at the beginning of the campaign, when we decided that we wanted to play within this homebrew world, I kind of shared the campaign doc, which is this living kind of character creation and perspective thing. So there's a world map, notes on the races of the world, a brief history, notable historical events, etc., to sort of set the scene, and very similar to I was just this like Matt Colville character or video where the players were talking about building their characters, and this idea of like if the Lord of the Rings was like a D&D game, and it's just like put the map down in front of the players, give them tidbits of different areas in different regions, tell them kind of the back of the world lore, and then let them tell you who they want to play based upon those things. Fortunately, like I'm writing a lot of this stuff with the players, so you get those 4 characters that you all built originally, and then I scrutinize them for ways that their backgrounds, their tragedies, their aspirations, their goals, I think I had asked you all for like kind of big goals that they would like to seek after, and I said, okay, how does this tie into like the game world and the nefarious plots? But because there's lots of little sects of bad guys that may rise to power in certain ways across the backdrop of the setting, but everybody kind of felt like there was this lunar divinity, this identity, like you had said, perspective, and this idea of like loss or betrayal or anger or trying to get right. And so, in the game world, this idea of like the battle between Selûne and Shar, and these two forces of, light and darkness, and, their coexistence, it felt right to start to tell this story of light and dark, because like, it's a human story, in that, we all personally sort of struggle with this, this idea of like isolation and community, and being in companionship and in community with other people, but like the world kind of isolates us and gets us alone, and then dark things can kind of happen in that space. So it was just really natural to sort of try and build that up. So Alangil, Corrin Kalin, these locations had kind of already been fleshed out with their religion, with their stuff, and it was just like, okay, let's do a moon festival in an elven province, and have the cult of Shar like start causing chaos, right? And then what kind of a story can we tell from there? So it was always kind of about this idea of there is a villain that resides in this Onyx Tower that is remanifested. Who that villain is still unclear. Is this dark spiritual entity that I think you all saw a glimpse of very quickly. And what are these sects of Shar that are spread out trying to do within the kingdom, right? They're trying to sow distrust and, just basically collapse society in on itself and swoop in and take power. And then also there were some other story beats sort of tied into the Feywild. So in addition to, lichens, fey creatures, dark fey courts, contracts, this seeking of community and all this other stuff sort of all tied it together. I did not know that the game was going to turn into this like, kidnapping thing with this betrayal until maybe, 3 or 4 sessions in, right? Okay. Because it was analyzing how the players were acting. Right, so it's just like, who knows? Like in the beginning, had like your characters treated Jim differently, or like helped him achieve his goals, or understood where he was coming from, then that resentment wouldn't have grown, right? So it's just like, how do the NPCs like grow and react to the players' choices, and making sure that like the villains, the NPCs like are acting in a realistic way, that are changing in a realistic way. They may change the story and direct where it would go. So it's just like, you all made your own enemies. So all I had to do was sort of react to it.
Yeah. That leads into another question I had. I know the gym thing, right, still caught me off guard. Like, never in a million years would have expected that is how that would have gone. I think that was brutal. You're a bad person for that. But I was super interested in how long that was the plan, because at one point, I don't remember, I believe it was myself and Will had a conversation with you, and we're like, Jim is the bad guy. Like, as a joke. Because we were like, well, because you gave us a little hint of like, oh, you guys are going to lose your minds when you figure out who the bad guy is. And we're like, okay, well, who do we know? And we went through the list, and we just got to this point where it's like, I don't think it is, but Jim's like the only person we know that it really could be. And when that, even with that like thought in my head, it's caught me so off guard. So how long specifically when did you decide that Jim does not leave that encounter alive? Or almost, maybe there was that opportunity for it.
So there, obviously the players can throw a wrench in any plan.
Yeah.
Right. I think in that particular encounter, it was just like someone was not leaving it alive.
Yeah.
Right. The stakes were so high that the choices had already been made.
Yeah.
I knew before you all had like basically arrived in Bleakwood.
Yeah.
That a deal had been cut, right? I was continually taking notes and kind of backtracking and rethinking about the game's past in order to figure out like what were the story beats that turned this person down this path, right? I think during that conversation, because I think it was like you and me and a couple others, and you were joking about him being the bad guy. I think I had said like to understand who the bad guy is, you just need to understand the cult of Shar.
Mm-hmm,
and like basically like how they act. So through like Forgotten Realms lore, right? They're there to twist things. They find people in isolation. They find people in their moment of weakness, and they offer them things that they could not otherwise get, right? Which is terrible, right? So it's just like you've got this relationship that's in a rift because like you two aren't really that close because you're half brothers, like you were raised together. There's perhaps this very normal and natural animosity that kind of grows between siblings, and it went down the wrong path. Mm-hmm. So I would say, I don't know what session that was where you all were traveling to Bleakwood and heading down the main road, but I'd say about there I knew that Jim was against you, I guess I would say. I wouldn't say the bad guy, and I don't know even to this day if I would say that he was like the big bad, because he wasn't. You very easily could have killed him in a couple of maybe two rounds of combat. Very easily took him out. So it's not like he was a big bad guy that needed to be defeated, but it's just like, do you need a big monster with 200 hit points to have like a game-changing, devastating end game encounter?
I don't think that there was anything better that you could have done. I think that was genuinely in that moment the perfect way to end that season. And I think part of the reason that it caught me off, because especially within the cult of Shar, like it does make sense that okay, they're gonna let him make a deal, but Kelpie, and even as a player, because looking back even to the first session where it's like, hey, Kelpie was hurt that he didn't see his brother at that concert. He was confused on why his brother was doing these things because he loved his brother, he like almost idolized this guy. And this whole time, it's this unreturned love that Kelpie didn't even know it wasn't unreturned. So that moment was so just. I remember it so vividly because I was smiling the whole time. I wanted to be sad, but I was smiling so much because I just could not believe how you worked that. It was just so. It was so impressive. I'm like, there's no way. Like, this isn't happening right now. Like, I couldn't get this. I had to
It was fun.
Yeah, I was like covering my mouth because I was like, I should be sad. Like, I should be upset right now. Like, my character should be upset. So I'm just sitting here like this, like covering my mouth, and it was just ridiculous. But I've talked a lot.
How did Moss? Yeah, Alex. How did you feel about the betrayal? Like, as in moment as it was happening.
Moss really doesn't understand Shar whatsoever, right? So the concept of the deals and everything was a mile and a half over his head. So it really caught me off guard there. I had no idea what was coming. My plan for that night was honestly to let Kelpie fall asleep after the watch, not wake anyone up, and let everyone get a nice rest. That was the only thing in my mind, is get these guys to sleep, and then throwing all that at us, and Moss not having really anything he could do to stop this, other than, as we eventually did, was just to talk him down. Mm-hmm. He was confused. His initial reaction was to pull Jim away from Kelpie and just slow down the pace of what was going on, because it really caught him off guard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys noticed either. So two things mechanically speaking,
okay.
Just, as a little peek behind the GM screen here. That particular poison that was being used, it would have done enough damage to maybe have killed one of you outright. Probably not Rend, but Kelpie. I mean, you were kind of the target.
Yeah.
So it was really like, okay, there's a chance that this will kill Kelpie if the poison works. And then simultaneously the weapon that Jim was using, that I think got left behind, to be honest.
It did.
That weapon was actually the same weapon that one of the muses was using during the camp encounter in Bleakwood.
Oh, that's, what do I call them? The bisexuals. That's
they were just very loving individuals. All of them. They were triplets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they were very loving. Yeah.
And they had several weapons. I forget which one brandished the dagger just offhand. But yeah, it was this umbral dagger that it was a returning shadow weapon basically.
Yeah. Kelpie was very there was a very strong chance that Kelpie would have died there. Kelpie was going to let that happen. And I think it was the perfect, I know I keep saying this, but I just can't help but praise it. This encounter was the antithesis to our party. Our game plan is talk it out, is fix it, okay, we don't, especially we have two people in the party who are super against killing for the most part, and I imagine Moss is this preserver of life. We're not a violent people, so putting this where it's we could have all rolled natural 20s over and over and over again. I think it still wouldn't have made sense for Jim not to end it that way. So that encounter was just phenomenal.
I mean, just because you roll a nat 20 doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just means that you hit. It doesn't mean how hard you hit. It actually does any damage. But true nat 20s just means that the only time they really affect anything is during the actual attacks. But at least that's how I perceive them to be. I don't know if Chris does it any kind of differently, because I've only had the privilege of 2 sessions. But that was pretty intense from my point of view as well. Being able to not even knowing Jim really. Me and Chris didn't even really talk about Jim's past, his present, his future, nothing. But I was able to placate my feelings towards Jim's based off of your guys' feelings based off of Jim. So knowing that he called you brother, you guys, you were attempting to get him out, all of this kind of drove me to that sense of, okay, well, we need to preserve Jim's life. That's why I intervened. I was the one that was helping the other guy that fell. I kind of picked him up to give you a notion of how, I'm more willing to help than I am to try to hurt somebody. And that's the reason why the other guy that fell inside the tunnel when we were coming back to the jail cell, I helped him up.
Yeah.
So it kind of it was really cool to be able to see how you guys were interacting with Jim, because then I was able to feed off of that. I'm really, I don't know, I don't want to say I'm really good at it, but I really like to see the energy that's happening and the time that's invested into something to kind of see like how I should be responding in those moments as well. So it really worked out on the way you guys were treating to be able to do whatever I did.
Yeah, no, for sure, 100%. All right, where are we? So let's talk about Chris. General beats here. Your on your perspective of what you think the future is going to look like here. Obviously, that's interesting conversation because you don't want to say a whole lot and ruin things, but just in a very general sense, how are you feeling about this next season?
So doing some prep work, we've talked about like the format of how to run game that is in a game world where it's very large, like without proper downtime built into the game experience. It's like we could spend like literal real world time, traveling in game, and making rolls for all the cross country stuff and stopping at any little town and seeing all the little side quest type things or like the life that's happening in the small hamlets and stuff. Or we could play a game to where we're just kind of blipping around, whatever you would call it. It's maybe sitcom style, not sitcom style, but like TV style. To where it's just like, okay, one session, all right, we're in this city. The next session, we're on a boat and we're arriving at this other place, right? The next session, we're on a road, we're arriving in this other town. I'm interested in understanding the pace of this upcoming season in order to tell the story that we want to tell. I'm also interested in kind of entering into this season with how do we tell the story of the downtime that has happened, because I don't think that we want to approach this upcoming game season like as a like, all right, and you enter Fathomport, right? I think it's more like, okay, 3 months have gone by, how do we tell that story in a compelling way?
Go ahead. I like that though.
Maybe working with each of you individually to sort of like figure out those story beats, coming together perhaps in like private game, like I'm gonna call them like game nights or like sessions, but like it would just be more like conversation sessions to be like, you two do travel together for a couple of months, but then this person wants to go off and do their own thing for a while, and that's what this looks like. I can talk to them privately. I would love to be able to have everybody sort of back together for a singular purpose at the start of the next session, even if that means having like those little one-off session zeros for season 2 with individuals as well.
I think I really like those little individual things, and I think we're kind of in a better position now where they can work a little bit more now that we have a few more people into the story and whatnot. But yeah, I think a time jump is super good because I feel like we're almost wasting time and almost doing a disservice if we don't do that. Like we get to kind of, we don't have to play at this heightened bit anymore. Like if we're going right from the end of season 1, then we're jumping into this in this like what the fuck just happened kind of thing, and we have to play that. But I think it's better if we get to play these more subdued, like, okay, it's been some time, we're dealing with it, like what is happening now. Oh man, a mysterious chatter put a question in the chat.
I like that chatter. He's got a
I would like to know your plan B on how you feel about the path, as the encounters that are planned never survive first contact. What do you elaborate on that, Culprit?
What path?
So basically, he has a plan, right, for us to be going there, and then during this time frame, we have these one-off little conversations here and there to kind of see, tailored to our own story on how we get brought to this new location. Well, I want to know plan B, because that's not going to work. We're going to end up doing something that's going to be different, that's going to change that path along the way. So it's more the whole funniness of, nothing ever survives, first contact with players.
Yeah, 100%. I have to trust in myself. This is the BS answer. Yeah, I have to trust in my ability to tease you all so much with these tasty little tidbits that are important to you that you go and do it yourself, and I don't have to ask you to do it. And so it's like, what do I want to accomplish in this next session? So like this quest for identity is kind of where I'm going for it. It's just like, I feel like, perhaps, figure out, okay, who is Rend? How did they end up in this particular prison? What's that all about? Who are they within the game world? Understanding, because Rend culturally like lives in like two paradigms, right? So like there are these native Goliath tribes that still exist on the island that basically have territories carved out for them, to where it's like the Imperials are just like, not allowed. You stay out, right? Very wild lands, and tradition is strong there. But at the same time, they are very integrated into the society, like because of how long they've had the opportunity to blend in, and like they're widely accepted. So it's just like, it's possible that Rend's family and friends and past like have both of these parallels. So it's just like, okay, what is the story behind both, and like how has it shaped Rend? So I'd love to explore that more. Tapping into the very beginning of the season 1, and like having Moss like actually discover like the breadcrumbs to like learn more about like his origin, which it will inherently tie into the lore of the world, which I think is going to be like a very interesting revelation. You'll begin to see things like blended together there, like, oh, this all connects. And then likewise with Kelpie being like, all right, I just had a falling out. My adopted father is dead. My half adopted whatever brother is dead. I don't really have family in Salt Shore, or like maybe there's some like vestige of a legacy there left behind. But from what Jim was saying, the village is like in dire straits. So maybe it's time that Kelpie starts figuring out who Kelpie really is, which goes back to your character choices, because we're choosing those things to have much deeper meaning, which will be revealed.
Yes, that was a really good answer, actually. Okay, so to wrap up the story stuff, I think we do like just a fun little thing. What was just individually, what was everybody's favorite bit of the campaign, whether it be like a story thing, a combat, whatever? Just kind of just get to reminisce on the good memories. Moss, where do you sit on that?
I think there's a tie here for Moss.
Okay.
And it's more of the just weird interactions that Moss ends up having. First among those being with Kelpie in the front seat of that carriage, talking about fish. And Moss was very confused. No idea what you're talking about. I've been in a forest for so long, I don't even know if the species of fish I know exist anymore. But you look like a fish. So you are my favorite fish. Forever and always. And that was one of those really, like, it brought Moss alive for me as a player to really be able to play off of that.
Yeah.
And then way back in Alan Gill, running around as a cat, and just that image in my mind of going to stop Jim from making this deal, and running up as a cat, and then just in the middle of the street with a lady on her front porch just turning into probably in her mind a walking tree just in front of her face. That one is one that'll always kind of stick with me because I think it caught her off guard. I think it caught everyone off guard, and he had no idea.
Yeah.
And Moss just kept going.
Moss has a lot of just funny stuff that happens to him.
You guys trying to discover the underground and Alan Gill and like just running in circles.
Oh my gosh! Is that your one? Your favorite bit? Oh yeah.
No,
we spent how long on that? Yeah. That sign or whatever.
You guys were trying to deduce like what was going on with this, like the secret Sharon cipher for like, I don't know, 40 minutes or something. you're like, yeah, I know what we need to do. We need to break into the Temple of the Moon, right?
Oh man.
That was so far off.
That was
probably my fault, because it's like I probably didn't do a good enough job of like instilling enough trust in. I say this as a backstabbing GM, but I didn't bestow enough trust in the good guys.
Soon as you explained it, I think we all realized that it was like, oh no, we were kind of being dumb. But that's a fantastic moment. What do you think your favorite moment was of the first season, Chris?
Mine?
Yes.
Oh gosh. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna pick out a couple here real quick.
Okay.
I think when Kelpie took the stage with the Riddlebend Quartet at the closing of the festival, like the final performance, and you hadn't studied your sheet music that they had given you the day before, and then you just bombed, right?
Yeah.
I was just like, oh man, like that was so perfect for me.
Yeah.
I think the scrying session with Nadine when Priestess Justira was scrying on Nadine's family. That was something that caught me off guard.
Yeah.
But I think like it really turned into this very beautiful RP moment. And like SJ played that marvelously.
Yeah.
I think the relationship between the group and Prince Scotty, I think, has been like one of my favorites. Because like he's a very interesting horse.
Yes.
To say that. I love the muses. I just loved playing the muses and trying to make y'all feel so uncomfortable, like but not uncomfortable, but you were kind of comfortable. Like, how can I make you more comfortable? And I think the betrayal or the test of the priest of Agamvald, where he basically like locked you all in a room and then just tried to kill you all, even though he had cast a preventative ward on you, just to see like what you would do.
Yeah, that was a really good moment. All right, Mr. Culprit. I know you've only had a couple sessions, but from your time with us, or if you've watched, I don't know how much of the campaign you've watched. What's been your favorite part of being here?
Well, I would have to say I love the vine whip attempts. the vast amount of vine whips that Moss is trying to make. Successfully hit. That was fun.
Missed like 3 in a row.
Yeah.
That was
not more. There will be more.
Yeah. That was a good moment. That was funny. Man, favorite. I have a couple. I think the best for Kelpie, like for the audience to like who is Kelpie, is the bit where he goes on the Disneyland tour, basically.
Oh God.
Because I like in the span of like an hour, I had met some band. The Aunt Manatan thing happened, I think, and then I was like supposed to be going somewhere. I was like, oh, there's a tour, and then bought hats for everybody. I think that was that is Kelpie. Like that's just what he does.
Yeah.
I think the Muses, the second interaction with the Muses, where Kelpie just doesn't really get it, and then he just is like, yeah, I'll gamble Nadine. That's a good moment. And I think because it like part of me wants to say like, oh, the last the season finale wants to be my favorite because it's a really good moment, but I just cannot help but laugh every time I think about Kelpie just absolutely bombing with that waitress chick, just not getting it at all. And then walking over to the group and being like, I don't know what her problem was. That's just that whole first episode was just really good for Kelpie. But
Yeah.
100%.
She was bad. She was a bad guy.
Yeah, she was a bad guy. I knew that, which is why I played it that way. Like, Kelpie didn't know that, but Kelpie's dumb enough that that made sense as a preventative measure. I think. Oh, go ahead.
What about like what do you wish you would have had the opportunity to explore more?
Ooh. I think the muses, and obviously they can come back. They're not dead, but Kelpie was really annoyed. He was like, "Why? Like, be my friend. Like, what's wrong with you?" When he just couldn't get that right. I think Kelpie would want a second chance to be like, these guys are really cool. Like, Kelpie likes them. He respects. They're musicians. They're magic. Like, those are his people. Like, why are you evil?
Famous.
Yeah, it's like, why are you evil? Be my friends. I think that's what Kelpie would pick. But me, if like Alan saw something more explored, honestly, another thing that could happen. I'm just ready to see what happens with Moss. Like, I think that's just like is more like, give us Moss, you know, and obviously that's gonna get the time and respect it deserves. But like, that's what I'm looking forward to as a character a lot.
Yeah.
What about you, Alex?
As far as anything, I'd like to go see more of it. Not the muses themselves, but the results of that battle with the. I'm interested to see what that tree turns into.
Okay.
And how that'll affect Bleakwood as a whole and the surrounding area. But the other big one for me would be making way back towards like the inner parts of the world, and I'm very terrified and excited to see what Moss does in any bigger city. Because we don't know yet. He's never seen more than maybe 500 people at once.
Right.
So that'll definitely be something interesting to get into.
Where do you stand on this, Culprit? You have obviously a lot more to explore. You're a little newer to this world, but has there been anything specifically that's happened in the two sessions that you wish you had a little bit more time with, or?
Actually, no. I think I believe that they stayed on pace of where they were, because everything needed to be kind of fast-paced to kind of bring me in there, put this catastrophic event in front of me, because like losing Jim like wasn't so much as my player's like whole backstory on him or anything, but was more of that was my foothold to get to know you and to get to know Moss. That's like my reasoning to be with you guys now and try to formulate like some sort of a bond, which I don't know if my character is going to find that bond or not, but at this time he sees you as kin to a person that he did trust while he was in prison.
Okay.
So in that case, it's like my story has just began.
Yeah.
So I have everything in front of me, all trying to consume it at once. But in the same instance, I kind of want to just ride the wave and kind of like see how this all just unfolds in front of me. Like it's cool being a GM on the backside to know how it all is, but it's also still cool as a player when you don't know the world that you're living in and how it unfolds in front of you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless any of us have anything else that we feel like we missed, or any good questions or anything, I was gonna open it up and see if there was anybody in chat that had any questions, and if not, we were gonna wrap it up. Anybody in the party, you feel like you got any hard hitting ones here? Because I feel like I got what I was looking for out of this conversation.
I got one question for Chris.
Uh-oh.
Crap.
In the prison.
Yes.
Oh.
When Moss was a spider.
Yeah. Okay.
Was there a check or anything from Jim to see if he understood that, or was that just way out of his realm of knowing what was going on?
Did Jim know if you were a spider, or if if there was someone wild shaping?
as the spider is doing an interpretive dance essentially to like signal something. And
I
then
think, okay, so just me dealing with spiders in general a lot in the last week or two here at the house for some reason, like in real life. I wouldn't be, if I see a spider, I'm not waiting to see if it's doing an interpretive dance or not. I'm going to try and destroy it. And I say that, but like 90% of the time, my wife's just like, no, put it in a cup and take it outside. And I'm like, oh, okay. But so that goes back to like the what I wish we could have had a little bit more time to explore, right?
Yeah.
Like part of me is like, y'all had a choice to make at like session 2, session 3, right? So you go back down into the Church of Shar beneath the Temple of the Moon and destroy the creature that is inside the altar room. I wish you guys, I honestly wish that battle could have happened.
Yeah.
Right. And instead the Silver Swords, or I'm sorry, the Knights of Selûne, basically, in that town, were the ones that took care of it. Then likewise, though, why was Jem like, oh my gosh, look at this terrible thing, right? And then Rend would have known this too, because Rend probably at least once or twice got to see Lady Weaver. And Lady Weaver was like the huge spider that nested inside that catacomb that was kind of beneath the passageway in between the cells and the mine. Okay. So Lady Weaver, regardless of what side you're on, so maybe Jem, like, you know, was kind of, he was being held there, but like had some loyalties that lie with the Sharans, or at least with the Spirit of Hatred. He was still a prisoner, and Lady Weaver is still a very dangerous and nasty thing. So, you know, I think honestly, my thought process there was just like, oh, spider, baby Weaver, kill it. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Lady Weaver never made an appearance. I wish they would have.
I'm not gonna lie, I was very upset, but I knew there was no possible way that I could convince the party, hey, let's go look at the big spider in the basement. I wanted to do that so badly. I changed my answer to that, to see the giant spider. There's no way for me to sell it, especially coming from Kelpie. Kelpie just has lost a lot of merit in like, hey, let's go into danger, because he's been beaten up by a horse, a mushroom, a dragon. What else is he? Just everything. He gets just beat up all the time. So he doesn't really have a lot of pull when it's like, let's go do this dangerous thing. But yeah. Okay. With that, not sure how much engagement this is gonna get, but anybody in the chat, anybody who's watched or just even through listening to this conversation, do we have any questions? Any
just a lurker perhaps that just wants to ask something,
maybe
even just D&D related?
Somebody that's not culprit pretending like he's
mustache related.
Oh, I will tell you what brand I use for my mustache moisturizer if you ask.
I don't need to moisturize mine. It's pencil thin.
Mine is not. But yeah, I'll give that a minute or two, see if anybody has any hard hitting questions on the campaign, and if not, we'll do our little wrap up. While we're waiting on that, I really want us at some point to sit down and go through that. I think Chris, you said this, but we should sit down and go through that Dungeons and Dragons movie trailer and just see how many things we can pick out just by eye. Like, just kind of go through it in slow-mo and just talk about that, because I'm super excited for that movie. I think that movie is going to be very interesting. I'm not going to say it's going to be very good. I'm going to say it's going to be very interesting. It's gonna, at the very least,
I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, at the very least, it'll be fun, and it'll be actually accurate to D&D for once in D&D media. You know.
Well, there are some out there that are accurate, but they're only as accurate as their budget would portray, right? Like,
yeah,
I've watched a couple of them that are out there. I mean, I watched one where it was like this guy had 100 bards, and he was just throwing the bards in front of him, like he had 100 player sheets, right? And each one of the player sheet was like bard number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He threw out 100 bards in front of him that were all getting magic missile to death, and then he hid behind the bards, the bodies of bards that all rushed in there to go for this, this final encounter, and he rushed around them and then was able to, get in close and go for the kill.
That's pretty funny.
Like,
Are you talking about our campaign? Because I do that with Kelpie all the time.
It's not that Kelpie was first to fall; it's that he was pushed to the front.
he was pushed to the front.
No, Kelpie's definitely low key. He caused it to himself a couple. Like the mushroom thing is the one I think back to the most of like the prime example of why Kelpie is always going down. He's like, whoa, what's going on with this guy? Boom. Like,
I tried to like throw there's chicken bones and raw meat on the floor next to this strange next to and it's just like, oh, what's this mushroom right here? Shriekers.
Yeah. I was hoping there were going to be little, what are they called? Myconids, whatever. I like those guys. I like little mushroom people, but they weren't. They were just mean, normal mushrooms. Yeah. I was so excited to meet little mushroom people. That's that is a must for season 2. Is I need little mushroom people, and then I will die happy. All right, looking like chat does not have too many questions here, so we're gonna start to wrap this thing up. But hey, to both the cast and everybody here, everybody who's ever been here to support this, it's super appreciated. Any time that's put into this, the follows, the subscriptions, anything, right? It means a whole lot. It lets us do this. It let us tell this story that I think was super beautiful, and the success that we had with this and the things we learned from this are going to allow us to progress in the future. And I really hope to see everybody back for season 2, which will be in January. But let's talk about what's going to go on before that, right? So right now we're in a little transitionary period. A lot of the content that you're going to be seeing the next couple months is going to be either discussion based or one shots, right? Where there may be some little longer things, looking to like have guests on, whatnot, stuff like that. We're looking for October. Not sure when in October. We're looking for October to be the start of a new campaign. That's going to be a shorter campaign that I will be DMing. It's called the Chateau. What is it? Chateau of Spectre Drin. It's going to be a little Halloween special thing that's going to run for probably up until right before season 2. So there's a lot coming that way.